Hey everybody, Jim Duncan with Nest Realty here in Charlottesville, Virginia, sitting here with Greg Slater, both associate brokers with Nest. It's early July 2024.
It's very hot.
It's very hot, and it's been very hot, and it's probably, as I'm fond of saying, it's the coolest summer we're going to have for the rest of our lives, which is fantastic.
So I get a question in this year that oftentimes is the first question I get when I meet somebody. Mm-hmm. It depends on the person, obviously.
Right.
Because we've had some settlements in our industry.
I think they're still proposed. I don't know.
No, I think they're going to go into effect here very shortly. Yeah. Unless something changes. But, you know, people ask me about it, right? Mm-hmm. And then, or sometimes they don't ask me about it. They tell me what their expectations and the net result is going to be. Right. How do you handle that question?
I hang up the phone. No, I mean, I think it's, you know, if someone comes to me and, well, oftentimes I'm the one prompting the conversation.
Fair enough.
I think
me too.
It's, you know, it's a matter of, you know, have you seen the news about what the commission lawsuits are and the settlements and NAR and all that stuff? For the ones who have heard about it, it's a different conversation. But for ones who particularly my buyer clients who are coming in that I've worked with for years, you know, we all have buyer clients you see every 6 months. You know, we've been looking for the right house. That's the harder conversation because I think that it's one where they trust me, they want to work with me, but I need to be in a position now of saying, I know we've worked together for 3 or 4 years, but before I show you the next house, we need to have a buyer broker signed. We need to establish what the commission is going to be, what the payment is going to be from the buyer to the buyer's agent, and how that's going to be structured in the contract. I think it's something that, you know, a lot of us have been doing it this way for years. I think that I'm being much more stringent about it, but I think it's a matter of explaining to them what that client relationship looks like, and what their expectations are and what my expectations are, and establishing what that fiduciary confidentiality and that client relationship looks like, and choosing to work together. I think for the ones who are coming in cold, I ask them if they're interviewing agents. Because I find that the ones who are interviewing agents are asking, I won't say better, but they're asking different questions, more pointed questions about what their expectations are. And that's a fun conversation because we've been doing this for a long time, and I like to think that we're okay at what we do. And so it's a matter of defining how I'm going to operate, when I'm going to operate, what my expectations are of the client, and the services that I'm going to provide and the guidance I'm going to provide up front. Much more so than what it used to be is, let's meet, let's go out a few times, let's see the houses, and then we'll talk about the client stuff. But now it's just a bit more formalized, professionalized relationship.
Sure. When I get that question, the first thing I say to people is, you know, we're not quite living in that world yet, right? Mm-hmm. We're pivoting now and starting to change some of our practices to be ready for that world when it changes. Because the real change to all of this is how a buyer's agent is compensated in the transaction, and that's the most important thing. When that offer of compensation leaves the MLS, that's when the rubber meets the road. What do you mean? Well, right now, in a real estate transaction that's listed in the MLS, there is a unilateral offer of compensation, meaning if an agent brings a buyer to that home that results in a transaction, that money is contractually owed, right, and an amount is set. And it may or may not be the same if any amount of compensation was set separately between that buyer and that agent. Right. For me personally, this conversation started in the 90s, right? When we got into buyer agency and things. You know, a consumer should be allowed to hire the agent they want to help them, but they should also define the scope of services and understand it, and they should also understand how much they are paying for it, because when the another party's setting that compensation, it basically caused bad practices in our industry, right?
Let me put it to you differently. When a seller comes to you and says, "I've heard of, you know, I think we want to work together. Should I offer compensation?" What do you think on that?
Sure. The seller and the buyer conversation are very different. On the seller side of the conversation, I often explain, you know, I think the biggest impact of settlement is it kind of removed the insulation around the compensation for what we do, right? In a lot of ways, our industry has changed a tremendous amount, but our business model for how we're compensating hadn't, right? Whether it's the technological advances that allow us to do 4 or 5 times more of the business than we did, in the 90s and the early 2000s, or it's the value of our housing in the last 4 years, greatly appreciated, and our fees went along with it under our model. But as far as the operator compensation goes, I don't talk to a lot of people that want to kind of test the water and see what happens without having something built into the price. For my sellers, right now, I kind of give them some guidance based on what I'm seeing in their price point and where the line is for what I think might cause a conversation we don't want the buyer and their agent to be having before they make a decision on the value of your home, right? I'm not saying there's a point where agents are going to do what they were accused of doing in the settlement, steering buyers away. Buyers lead me to what they want to see as much as I lead them to what I want to see. I'm not steering them.
I think that's the big shift. I mean, I think that right there is the big shift, because the buyers, once you establish up front what the buyer agent compensation is going to be, what the seller is offering is not secondary, but it's not a thing that is even really considered until you get to that point of what the offer might be, in my opinion.
Sure. And so back to my advice, right? How much are we going to put in there? I've had a couple of people try lower. I've had one that tried lower and adjusted it up a little bit when it didn't sell. And because after it depends on the expectation for how fast the home is going to sell.
Right.
It depends on the market conditions around the home. And because I think that's what the settlement did. It removed the insulation between our business model and market conditions. They should always have an impact on what's going on. Because if you and I are competing for something, you might be willing to do it less, or you might not. And And I think there'll be more of that. But, post MLS change, there'll be something built into the price of that home or not that is on the table for the buyer to use as a concession. However they see fit. And that will be determined by how much they owe their agent and how much they need maybe in closing cost assistance and things like that. So I'm not sure where I am yet post MLS change for how much I disclose as a seller's representative, right? Because under the new settlement, a buyer can only be paid based on how much is in their buyer agreement. So if they don't have a buyer agreement, they don't have to be paid.
Right.
If they have a buyer agreement that says they make X and seller is offering more than that, and you disclose more than that, you may be giving up something you otherwise didn't need to give up. So it'll be on a case-by-case basis. The behavior I wonder the most is if you're going to show property in a non-MLS world that shows you how much the seller is offering, are you going to find out before you show any listing what's built into the price? Or are you going to wait to see if your client's interested and you start the conversation of, because we show a lot of houses that never go anywhere, right? I don't do market analysis on homes until after my client tells me they're seriously considering buying it. So do I care what the compensation is when I'm walking around with a buyer agreement before I walk in the home?
I don't know, is the honest answer. I mean, I think it's something that I feel better because I do this every single day. And I'm going to more rapidly get to that equilibrium of how I practice. But I don't know yet how I'm going to work that on a case-by-case basis. I'm inclined to think that my practice is going to be to find out ahead of time before I show houses for no reason other than to gauge the market of what is being put out as a concession. Because once the commission stuff in the MLS goes away, we're going to have no visibility into what the concessions are on a public front. Right. So I think that for me, collecting the right amount of data, I think that I'm going to need to know that just so I can guide my buyers and my sellers from a wider scope. Because if I were to check the commission or whatever's being offered 1 out of 10, I'd be getting a much more narrow look at what is being offered as a concession. So as I'm having this conversation, I think that my practice is going to be find out for every single home that I show, just so I can aggregate a better view of what the market is.
It's very complicated and difficult to explain these things now, somewhat hypothetically, before the settlement's actually gone into effect, because we don't know exactly how it's going to change every consumer's behavior and our colleagues' behaviors. We just don't know.
I'm writing, I write monthly on jimsnote.com, and I wrote something publishing this week or next, that basically, with respect to the settlements, I think that the next 1 to 8 months is going to be a bit chaotic and confusing for many people involved: consumers, attorneys, realtors, brokerages. But give it 10 to 18 months, I think it'll be fine.
I think it'll be fine too. One of the things I often say to folks is, or maybe it's more of an industry conversation, but for the first time in our careers, we're going to have plus or minus 1,000 realtors in our market trying to figure out what their time is actually worth when they're forced to define it earlier in the process and when it's not laid on the table for them to pick up. Yeah. And furthermore, from the seller perspective, I give the advice, we can set an arbitrary amount based on what we think we know at the time and have to be able to be nimble. But at the end of the day, I think the seller needs to be expected for the right buyer, the best buyer for their home, that purchase price is ultimately going to include compensation for their buyer's agent, whether it's included in the price at the list price or not, then it will come out in a contractual negotiation.
I think so. I mean, I think that's the right advice going forward. Yeah. July 2024, we are in the hopefully, we canceled the meeting today because of COVID. We are in a new market, as we are every day. We're planning for the end of 2024 and planning 2025. What are your predictions for the 25 market? For the city of Charlottesville and the county of Albemarle? When I answer the question, I'm going to take them both.
Okay. I generally look at just the county of Albemarle because I think, what percentage of all of our market is the county of Albemarle? I need to look at that. Is it 50%?
That's more than that.
60%? So I use Albemarle as my barometer. The city is kind of like Crozet. It's a hyper local part of the market that there's a specific. All you had to do was watch Lockland Hill from the Albemarle County side of the line to the city county side of the line. It appealed to different people. But as I look ahead, I think we have to kind of look at the levels we're achieving this year and work off of that. Yeah. I think it's going to feel a lot the same. I'd like to think the trend we're on will continue, and it's an ever so gently increase in the number of homes that are available on the market. It's an ever so gently increase in the number of days a home stays on the market before it goes under contract. And it's a leveling off, and in some segments of the market we'll be comparing to comps from this year and maybe not pricing them quite as high. Right. And it's hopefully a continuation. I think our market has gotten to a baseline level of, it can't go much lower, right? People have to buy and sell their homes. Yeah. People have to move in and out of this community. And this is, I don't want to describe the pre-recession, but that's what I said in 2009. We got rid of all the frivolous buying and selling intra-Charlottesville, and it came down to just for the people who had to do a real estate transaction. I think that's where we're now, and there are going to be building blocks that'll tell us the story as we get there, but I think there'll be a slight improvement in the conditions in favor of the buyers, but nothing dramatic.
Boring is good. So my predictions for 25 are going to be looking at hindsight a little bit. In Albemarle County, first half of 2023, there were 914 closed transactions. First half of 2024, 798 closed transactions. City of Charlottesville, 2023, there were 224 closed, 219 in first half of 2024. In talking about new construction, in the city of Charlottesville, 6. Yeah, okay. 6.
I was in the margin of error.
Yeah, 2023 and 2024. So
next to none.
Not much. I think that the city is going to, I think that my quick notes for what the predictions are going to be is going to be slightly more inventory, 5 to 10%, I think year over year. Flattening of prices. Again, it's a broad brush. Look at your micro market is going to be very different. It could be flat, could be a little bit down, could be a little bit up. Days on market, I think, is going to tick up a little bit, maybe from 5 to 12 median days on market. I think that the expectation setting is going to be the hard part, as it always is that buyers need to understand their micro market, and sellers are going to need to understand what the anchors are for the sellers, and that what the seller needs or wants to make to go to the next stage of life is wholly irrelevant to the market. So I think that's a hard part that I have with sellers is saying, I know you need to make X, but your buyer doesn't care. And I tend to be a little bit more delicate when I'm talking to folks, but that's the truth of the matter. And I think the city is, one thing that I'm writing about next month, I think that in the city of Charlottesville, we have the new zoning in 2024. I think we're going to see a little bit more understanding of what that means. For the redevelopment of the city, I think we've all heard anecdotally that what people wanted to do might not be fiscally viable because the cost of building are going to be a bit more challenging.
The cost of development is unknown until you start to try to develop it.
I talked to one person who said that they wanted to go from a duplex to a quadplex, and that meant they needed to sprinkler the house, which made it
cost prohibitive. Look, the basic math you have to do if you even want to go down this road, and most agents can't even do this. Mm-hmm. But if you have a property that will take 6 homes, it's probably 6 townhomes.
Yep.
Do you know what a developed Albemarle County townhome lot is worth right now?
Right now? Yeah. I've got my guess.
Well, it depends on where it is. We don't have to put a number on it now. Yeah. But so then you take that number times 6. That's not the value of the property.
No.
And I'm seeing properties listed in the rezoning spaces that is like, yeah, you couldn't get that if the lots were developed with water and sewer and a driveway and a place to put a foundation already approved.
I think right now in July you're seeing some testing in the market. You're seeing some properties that have been rezoned, and agents and sellers are testing the market to see where that threshold is. And again, I think in 18, 36 months we'll have a better understanding of what's happening today. It goes. I've said this a few times about the settlements and about the zoning and a lot of stuff that. Going back to when they passed the health care bill in the U.S., one of the senators or House reps said, we need to pass the bill in order to see what's in it. I think that's where we are right now. They passed the zoning, and we're figuring out exactly how it's going to play out.
That's right. And how are we going to get there? Somebody who has enough money and time and risk averse enough to go ahead and roll the dice, or is it going to take 6-month-long study periods?
Yeah.
The cost of figuring out. I've been involved with people doing small scale projects in the city, and I represent a developer and a builder that builds infill in the city, and to see what they go through to get to the point they can actually get a home started, much less completed, is remarkable. And the hidden costs or the unforeseen costs that are induced by the nature of the property or what the city administrators want and everything is it's mind-boggling. And I think that novice coming from out of the area who wants to own a piece of Charlottesville and own this nice property that they can have income from 6 units or whatever just doesn't quite understand that. And there are not a lot of people with enough expertise, at least in our industry, I think, that can lead them to that quantifiably.
Completely agree. Data-wise, market-wise, consumer behavior-wise.
I guess I didn't see the end of detached lots in Crozet coming so fast, yeah. and so there was a run on those back there in Glenbrook. Essentially, this is where we're running out. But otherwise, no. This. Not a lot of people know this. I do annual, quarterly, monthly. I do daily analysis of the inventory. Yep. I look at how many homes came on in the last 24 hours versus and what day of the week they come on the market. I mean, I look at some crazy granular stuff. So, there weren't a lot of surprises this year for me in that regard. I knew it was going to be another tough year to both be an agent and a buyer. Yeah. It's not in all cases. It hasn't been very tough to be a seller for a while, and it's still not. If you get prepared, prepare your home, price it right, and have a good strategy, you can interact as a seller pretty easily with this market.
I think my biggest surprise this year has been the speed with which I feel the market has softened. It feels like it happened over like a 3 to 5 week period. It feels like the market's pulled back. And I don't know yet, and we'll know next year, but I don't know yet whether it's pure seasonal, whether it's systemic in the interest rates, or if it's something that's going to persist through 2025. I think the first half of the year, some of the prices that buyers were paying surprised me. I think that there was some, I think there might have been some irrational exuberance, some exhaustion from buyers and they just went to the point of saying, fine, I need a house, I'm done. I will overpay, knowing I'll overpay
The key to being agents like us is to know when somebody overpaid and not misuse that comp to price your next listing. This is the biggest mistake I see in the market, and this is what perpetuates some of the craziness we see. In some cases, I think our inventory right now is lingering a little longer because agents don't quite really understand the bleeding edge of the market and how to price everything to that softening.
Well, I mean, I look at the solds to get a baseline, but if I'm doing an analysis for my clients, I'm looking at the contracts because you're looking at the last 6 weeks and not 5 months ago. It's like when I look at the Case-Shiller data, that's 4 months old. Sure. You look at the Altos data, you look at calculated risk, you look at the Resi Clubs, you look at the stuff that's more current that gives you that insight into what's happening today. Because it's, if you're looking at 4 to 6 month old data, you're reading a different book.
Yeah, if I were selling your home in Crozet and we were in that pipeline of 6 to 8 weeks out, I'm begging for something else to come on the market and sell in that time period, and I'm calling every agent involved, whether they were the listing agent or I can figure out who had buyers showing it, and I'm looking at the online traffic. Since we can see the views, I want to know how many showings and I want to know how many offers, because that's where we first found evidence of what we were feeling to be true. If you list a home and you're estimating how many, everybody estimates how many showings they're going to get in the first weekend now, right? And that's where you feel it first. It's in the showing level of activity.
I think it's also, one of the things I've written about this too is that I've been happy that we're back, in Nest, that we have the building again, is that we can actually have conversations and just, ancillary conversations of what are you seeing? What have you heard? I mean, I think the office meetings that we've had, that I use those as markers for the next few weeks. I was in a meeting last week and I heard this one got 3 offers, this one got 6 offers, this one got no offers, and using that, just the surrounding in any profession, surrounding yourself with other professionals who are good at what they do, makes us better on a daily basis. So having those conversations, I think, is enormously beneficial to me professionally and to my clients by virtue of that.
For at least 2 years now, I think the key to understanding the market is understanding demand. We know everybody can understand supply, but not everybody understands demand. And the best way to understand demand, honestly, is to build relationships with the builders and be able to talk to the new construction rep in the community that might be competition for your listing. And you can just stop in and talk to them. They'll tell you if they're happy or sad or busy or not busy. And if they have no traffic in that new home model, that's a barometer to what you can expect for demand as well.
Going forward, one piece of advice for a consumer in this market in July of 24?
I think it's the same every time we do this video.
It really is.
Slow down, start talking to agents, and figure out someone that's a good fit for you, and start the process and do the work. The longer you're exposed to the market, the better prepared you will be to make a decision. I often tell folks when I start showing them property that they never want to play poker with me, because I've been showing property for so long, I can tell pretty fast whether someone's interested in a home or not by their reaction. It's easy. But I tell them I'll know which one we're going to make an offer on by the time we walk out the door. And when we make that offer, whether we're competing or not, I want us to high five when it comes back ratified, right? And not have the reaction of, oh, what did I just do, right? And it takes a while to get there, so you have that confidence to know what to do when the time is right and the right home comes along. Because we all lived through buyers who saw their best home but weren't ready to buy it.
My advice for someone looking at late 24 or 25 market is engage with the process of finding and interviewing and engaging the right agent today. Is start that, interview them, ask them questions, make sure they're a good fit, and then start. If you're buying next year, start looking at houses today. Go to open houses. Go to houses with the agent, so the agent get a better vibe and feel for what you're looking for. And for sellers, start having the conversation about what projects you need to be doing now to get prepped for 2025. The remodeling world has picked up, and the handy people have picked up, so that lead time for getting your house ready for 25 really needs to start in July, August, September. So I think that it's for anything in life, you start preparing now, so when you need to make a quick decision, you're able to make that with confidence because you have the experience and the time invested to make sure you feel good about it.
That's great advice, because things are taking longer. But when you hire that agent and you see something you want to go see, but you're still in those early stages, don't just go see it or call the listing agent to go see it because you don't want to waste your agent's time. I want to be there with you for anything you're interested enough to see, because I can't understand that home and what it is in the market without seeing it with you.
That's probably one of the questions for my buyers is, what have my buyers and yours too, I'm sure, spend more time online looking at homes than I ever have or ever will.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a matter of saying what have you favorited and what have you not liked, to get an understanding of what, and the not liked are really more important in a lot of ways than what they have liked. So it's any working relationship, you need to have that understanding, that trust, and listen.
Well, that's a good plug. You know what I'm not utilizing yet because it's kind of new, is the new Nest app. Have you had a consumer use that Nest app so you have a window into their behavior, right?
I have.
Yeah.
I have several on it right now. I write about it almost every month. Just a little link to it. It's remarkable insight for both parties, for both sides of it, because I can see what they're looking at, what they're favoriting, and all of that, and what searches they are defining, which is very helpful for me, because if they define a search here, I want to take it here, so that we can see a little bit what's on the margin and the edges.
So I always ask all those questions, and it wasn't until I was sitting here right now that I need to work harder in getting the folks I'm working with on that app, because I want that level of insight into what they're doing. So, shameless plug for working with a Nest Realty agent. We have an app for our clients that is a valuable tool.
Absolutely,
it's pretty new.
So going forward, I think it's going to be an interesting 24 and always an interesting 25. I'm Jim Duncan with Nest Realty, 434-242-7140. And Jim at nestrealty.com.
And I'm Greg Slater with Nest Realty, 434-981-6655. Greg Slater at nestrealty.com. And as I've said before, we put our numbers out there because we want to hear from you. We like to talk.